So today we'll do a few fun things. So we're going to set up a dev center in Microsoft Azure. And then we're also going to create a dev center project, which we need in order to connect it to a managed DevOps pool. A managed DevOps pool is what we will be able to use for running our pipelines in, for example, Azure Pipelines. We will set it up with Terraform. And today I'm going to actually try and use the AzAPI provider. We are going to use the AzAPI provider. I've been using it more recently, so I'm not the best like working with it. The Azure RM provider and the syntax and the IntelliSense that you get with VS Code, and I'm more familiar with that, but I've been trying to transition more and more to AzAPI, which is kind of, you're writing Terraform, but you're kind of having the bicep experience in some way. You'll see what I mean. That is the mission for today, at least. But back to the Azure Pipeline part of this. So you may be wondering, what is managed DevOps pools? Basically, whenever you've had the need to run any pipelines, you've been using Azure Pipelines, which is a sub-service within Azure DevOps. You also have other services in Azure DevOps like the version control, where you can have your repositories, you can have boards for organizing your work, you can plan your epics and stories and whatnot. But we're focusing more on the repository and pipeline part of things. So basically, you can see here we have a few different options for agent types. So we've always had the agents hosted and managed by Microsoft, and that's as easy as just going into the Azure Pipeline menu, create a new pipeline, just choose pretty much the defaults and just run with it. And you will use the agents that are hosted by Microsoft, and you will use the image that they provide. So you don't have much customization when it comes to that. If you wanted more customization, you would look to the self-hosted agents, which is the second one here on this list. And they're good if you need, like, maybe you need a specific software on your images for your pipelines or whatever it is you need. So you can host these images, you can run the pipelines on your own virtual machines. Sort of the extension of this is when we come down to the Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set agent. So I've actually worked with that before as well, and think of them as your self-hosted agents, but you have the added benefit of scaling. So Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set, they can scale up and down depending on what need you have and what use. So if you are running jobs that are under heavy loads, for example, maybe you want to scale up to be able to handle all this extra workload. So then Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set agents are pretty good for this, because you could have your own custom image, but you could also have the benefit of, yeah, it'll just scale for me, so I don't have to think about it. But what about the managed DevOps pool agents then? So as you can see here, this is the fully managed service where the machines and the containers that power the agents, they are not in your Azure subscription. So that's true also for the Microsoft hosted agents, but for your self-hosted agents, or if you were running Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets, you would have them in your subscription, and you would have to manage them and just look at them, I guess. But that's not the case with the managed DevOps pool agents. So they live in a Microsoft Azure subscription that you don't see. So the only thing that you manage really is the images and sort of like some of the settings. This was very helpful for me, because when I started looking into this, I wasn't really sure, like, okay, but what's the difference here compared to like the VMSS agent pools? And there's some pretty significant changes here, I guess. Then, so for example, for the hosting I mentioned, if you're running managed DevOps pools, you have them in a subscription that you don't see. But if you run VMSS, you have the agents in your subscription. The standby agent schedule is a little bit different, so you have some more flexibility for configuring standby agents to run in your managed DevOps pools, whereas with the VMSS, they support only the single standby agent. Maybe not the best. Pool size, you have support of thousands of agents, and then you have support for hundreds of agents with VMSS, whatever that means. But yeah, I will leave a link to this because there's more stuff, obviously. A big one is the multiple images one. So with the managed DevOps pools, you can have multiple images in your pool. Whereas with the VMSS, you have the one image, and that's the image that you're scaling with, and that's the one you're running with. But I guess with a managed DevOps pool one, you could have one pool, whereas you use the a marketplace image where you've not done anything, you've just taken it as is, and you have a separate pool where you have a maybe it's a Linux image, but you've customized it, maybe you've added a few softwares or done some setting, or maybe removed some stuff that you don't need. So some more, I mean, the name of the game here seems to be, it's a bit smarter cost-wise, it's more customizable both with the scaling and with your images. So there's just, think of it like the VMSS 2.0 maybe, like a better version of it. There's more stuff, but again, maybe not the most fun to just read through the documentation, so I'll leave a link to this, and we should get into the coding part. So in previous videos, I've not done, like we've worked with Terraform, we've done the coding part before, but we've not, I haven't gone maybe super in depth into all the steps I take when but yeah, just super simple. I've created a folder which I've called Azure Terraform DevOps pool, and we need a main.tf. I also like to have a variables.tf, and in here I already know some variables that I will want to have, which I always use. Environment is the one. I'm gonna, for sake of brevity and speed, we'll accept that. I like location. We don't need a default, so we'll actually go ahead and remove that. Then I like to have a location short, not shirt. And we could do I don't always do this, sometimes I have something I call a common name. So you'll see it's like the suffix to resources that I create. So a common name, prefix, I guess. Suffix. Prefix is the thing that comes first, and suffix is the thing that comes in the end, I hope. Otherwise I will look like an idiot right now. But yeah, then we want to have, so let's say we were gonna have like a dev and a production environment for this. I can have different files for different environments. So I'll create a variables, and then we will have a production tfvars. That's a folder. Nope. We'll do prod tfvars, and in here we can do, so the environment is production. The location, I'm actually gonna run Sweden Central for that. The location short, I like it to be SC. And the common name for this then we'll call manage pool. Okay, so we have some of the prereqs away. So let's start with the last bit of prereqs is we need a Terraform block, and we need a required providers block in there. We will use AzAPI then, and I do believe that we are working with version 2.4.0. We may need to use additional providers here, but we'll start with that for now, and then we'll just say the provider block. We don't need to do, we don't have to do this, but we could do pre-flight. If you don't know what pre-flight is, I made a video about it. It's basically the very short version of it is that sometimes you write Terraform configuration and you run a plan and everything looks good because according to Terraform rules, everything is okay. But then when you run the apply step and it is actually trying to deploy things to the cloud, you may have a policy which say you're not allowed to do this configuration, but the plan step doesn't know. However, if you enable the pre-flight here, you can get alerted about this issue already at the plan stage. So it's a great way to save some time. So the first thing we need is a resource group. So the type is resource group, and we'll pick the latest API. So here's a great thing then. So here I already have my variables. The only thing I want to change is I don't want this common name to be there. I want it to be the suffix. So what this will be translated to, let's say we deploy production, it'll be RG. That's actually, yeah, I need to fix that because my brain will not like it otherwise, but I like it to be the prefix of the resource, which is RG for resource group. Then you have environment, which is production or PRD, it'll be in this case. Location short is SC, and then common name is DevOps pool. Location, we can do variable location. All right, so a prerequisite in order to be able to use managed DevOps pools is that you need a dev center. A dev center is perhaps something that should receive its own video. I don't know too much about it other than that I need it for a managed DevOps pool. You can use it to manage images, I think, and more stuff. I think there's a lot to it, but I'm not an expert on it yet. But that could be a future video. But either way, we do need one now. So we'll just go ahead and call it Dev Center. The type is also a Dev Center. The name, I'm fine with the prefix DC. So Dev Center doesn't really have, at least if you read the CAF documentation, the Cloud Adoption Framework, I don't think this resource has a recommended prefix, but we will run DC, I guess it's fine. The parent ID in this case is the resource group we created. And the location is also Sweden Central, so that's all fine and good. I don't think we need to supply too many properties here. I do remember once I was having some issues, and Terraform told me, it recommended me to set schema validation enable to false. I'll just do that again, just not have any issues for now. But I think that's it. I'm pretty happy with that. What we want to have next is we want to have a project. So a Dev Center project is a child resource of the Dev Center resource that we have here. However, the parent ID is actually still the resource group, but let's flesh this out. So we have the AzAPI resource, and we'll do Dev Center project. And going down in the list, here we go, found it. We can call it project, so for the sake of saving some time, we'll do the same thing here. Like I mentioned, the parent ID is actually not the Dev Center itself, it's actually the resource group. The location is fine like that. Here we actually do need to provide a body then, so we'll create a body block and we'll add some properties. And what we need to add here is where we tell it what Dev Center ID is this tied to. So here we can supply the Dev Center resource that we created, so we can dynamically fetch that ID. And I think I want to have a display name, so this will be the Dev Center project for managed pools, DevOps managed pools. And we'll pop this on here as well. So this is coming along pretty well. So we have a resource group, we have a Dev Center, and we have a Dev Center project. So I think it's time we try and deploy this. So we can do Command J to bring up the integrated terminal inside VS Code in our IDE. And we'll do a Terraform init. Perfect. And let's do usually you would run a plan, but let's save on some time. So we'll do a Terraform apply, and we'll select our variables file, so we don't have to give every variable separately. So here you can see it wants to create the resource group, the Dev Center project, and the Dev Center. So let's say yes. While that is deploying, I should have maybe said this earlier, but you do need to register the Microsoft.DevOps infrastructure resource provider. So just going through your subscription, and then you have resource providers, and then you search for DevOps, just select it and then click register. My Terraform deployment actually just failed due to internal server error. It could be because of this, it could be some other reasons. I'm currently redeploying, but either way, this one needs to be registered for this one to be able to work. Alright, so after a 20-25 minute complete shit show disaster class, I finally managed to deploy my Dev Center. What happened was I have a dev subscription and I have a production subscription, and usually for my videos I do some research and I deploy some things into the dev subscription, so I then can do the video on the prod subscription. And I thought I was working against the production subscription, but turns out I wasn't. And then I tried to delete that stuff, but I was thinking, yeah, but it's in the dev subscription, I could probably go ahead and deploy I can probably just go ahead and deploy into the production in the meantime, but then that failed because it turns out dev centers, the names has to be unique across the tenants. And then I said, fine, I will delete everything. So I did that and I tried to deploy it, and it seemed to be in some sort of failed state. So like it's deleted in Azure, but it's sort of still in the control plane maybe somehow. I don't know. Every time I tried to deploy, it said that the dev center was in a failed state. So my solution is I appended -new to my dev center. Professionalism. But anyways, so that worked eventually, and then now we do have a project. So if we hop in here, we can see we have our resource group, then we have our dev center, which we fought for, and then we have our project down here. So it's just an empty project right now. Something else that we have to do is that once we create, I don't know if it's either the dev center or if it's the dev center project, but we need to reference a service principal, because what I want to do is I want to VNet integrate this managed DevOps pool that we're working with, which is, I forgot to mention, but that's another huge feature of either the VMSS, like the virtual machine scale sets, or the managed DevOps pools, is that we have the ability to put them inside our virtual network, which means if it needs to make outbound calls, we can protect that internet traffic either through an Azure firewall or a NAT gateway or something like that. But in order to do that, we need to give the service principal some permissions, because it needs permissions on the virtual network that we're going to create. So before we do anything, we actually have to bring in the Azure AD provider. And the version, it's scary that I know this in my head, but I do believe it's 3.8.0 the version. Okay, I see the mistake. It's actually not 3.8.0, it's 3.4.0. And the source is HashiCorp, not Azure. So I think if I do an init now, yep, it works. So if we go back to our data block, we want to make sure we're working with the proper one. We can call it this. The display name, if I recall correctly, is DevOps Infrastructure. Once we have this, there are a few roles we want to give it. I don't want to make two resource assignment, or I don't want to make two role assignment blocks. So I'm going to do a little bit of a loop here. So at first I want to have a local, which I will just call SPN roles. And it's going to need two roles. It'll be the reader, and it needs a network contributor. And then we can start working on making a role assignment for this. Actually, this is also something I don't quite like with the AzAPI when working with their role assignments, is how they do, at least not the data block for getting the role assignment. I just think the Azure RM provider does this better. There are better ways to solve it, but I don't want to drag this on for too long. So I think 4.30 is the latest. So we're going to do that. Then I want to have a data block for Azure RM for their role definitions, that is. And yeah, that's actually what I need. I don't need that last part. So basically what we're doing here is we are creating a local where we say we want the reader role and we want the network contributor role. And then we need to get the role definition for those roles. So I will do a data block for Azure RM role definitions. And we will just look through this list basically. So the name is just each value of this locals list. So it's a reader, network contributor. So this basically is the same as doing, if we did data Azure RM role definition reader, and then do name reader, and then we would have to copy this, and we would do network contributor, and then you would have two different blocks. But doing it this way, we can keep it a little bit simpler. Then we want to do the actual role assignment. So we will switch back to AzAPI, SPN role assignment The type is actually authorization role assignment. Oh, I almost forgot. We do need to loop this one as well. So we'll do a toSet for the same list. So a little bit of a weird thing with role assignment when it comes to Azure Bicep and obviously also for AzAPI is that we have to give it a name. In Azure RM, you wouldn't have a name property, but here you do. And it just has to be something that is unique for this role assignment. So let's say you made 3 role assignments. All 3 of them would have to have a unique GUID. And there are several ways we can achieve this. And if we want to run this in an automation in the future, we want to make sure that we don't overwrite something or we don't. Basically, we want to make sure we generate unique IDs, but they need to be consistent through each run. One way to do that, which I've been using lately, is the UUID-v5 function that is in Terraform. So we can supply this with a few things just in order to try and make this a unique ID every time. And yeah, it's basically this actually. So we're gonna grab the data block for Azure AD Service Principal. So that's the DevOps Infrastructure Service Principal. And we're gonna get the ID, or actually we should get its object ID. So if we had one service principal in dev, for example, that would have a different object ID than the object ID of a service principal in production. And that is exactly what we want. Then we will grab the role definition. We need to, since this is from a for each, we have to specify which index, and it's just fine doing each value. I think should be fine here. We could do a ID, or you could do role definition ID. Actually, we'll just do ID and see if that works. But this means that since only at least for this run, for example, we're gonna do 2 role assignments, and the object ID is going to be the same for them both, but the ID of the role is going to be different. So that's how we can generate 2 different unique IDs here. If it's a little bit complicated or confusing, that's understandable. You kind of just have to work with it and practice it for a little while, and it'll make sense in your head. Okay, let's move on to the body of this one. So that's pretty nice with the extension. Sometimes you have what's called required properties, so it's already prepared for you which ones you need. So I can just press enter and enter. Here we can do so principal ID in this case is the object ID of our service principal. That's the one we want to use. The role definition ID is, you can see it here, is the role definition, but we have to supply each value. So we make sure that we're going to run through this twice, and it's going to use, the first time is probably going to use reader, and the next time is probably going to use network contributor. I think there is also principal type, which in this case is service principal, which we could add. And I did mention we are making this because we want to, in order for us to be able to VNet integrate our managed DevOps pool, this service principal requires these 2 permissions in order to be able to do that. But what it really requires is the actual virtual network, because if you don't have that, what are you going to integrate? So we're going to create that quickly. This is also like a gotcha. I can't tell you how many times I've fallen for this. I type virtual network and I picked the first one, but as you can see right there, that's the virtual network for SCVMM. It's not what we want. We want the virtual network for Microsoft.network. Okay, so we'll pick the next one. That name is fine. The parent ID is the resource group, that's correct. And the location is fine. Then we want to have a body block. The properties, I think we pretty much only care about the address prefix here. So we'll just make a /24. We also want to have a subnet. And we actually need to delegate this subnet for this type of resource. I'll show you. Call it subnets. Then you have virtual network subnets. The name is fine like that. The parent ID is the virtual network. Location, does it have location? I don't think it has, right? It has, but it's optional. We'll skip it for now. We do need to supply body and properties. The address prefix, I'll actually just put this to the same. For this lab, it doesn't really matter. This one is important though, delegations. Delegations is basically some subnets you place certain types of resources in, and then you create a delegation for that subnet, which most times means you can't use that subnet for anything else. Sometimes that's not the case, but for example, you need a subnet dedicated for Azure Firewall, for example, or maybe even more than one for Azure Firewall, but Virtual Network Gateway, for example, you need a delegated subnet for that. It has that one, and I think also Azure Bastion. Not only does it need delegation, it also has to be named in a certain way. But we don't have that problem here. We just need to create a delegation here. So we create actually this is a list of objects, and we have to enter the name. I'll just call this DevOps infrastructure. I don't think it matters too much. Then the type, sorry, not the type. Properties, service name. It's Microsoft DevOps. Can't type today. Pools. Awesome, so we know we only need to do one more thing, and that's just tell Terraform at what scope or what parent does this resource assignment live in. And we want to put it at the virtual network. So because it only needs access to the virtual network to do its integration, so we should be good citizens and use least privilege here and make sure we don't assign it too far up the chain. But yeah, let's see if this works. So we can do an apply again. Oh, right. We added the Azure RM provider. Oh, this is gonna fail as well, I think. Since we added the Azure RM provider, we need to tell what subscription we're working with, unfortunately. All right, let's do this. Okay, so we want to create a virtual network. We want to create a subnet. We have one role assignment for reader, and then we have one role assignment for network contributor. Then it wants to update the dev center place. It does that every time, not sure why. So we'll set that to yes. Okay, that was successful. So if we go back and we do a refresh, we can see we have a virtual network. If we go into it and go through access control and role assignments and type DevOps, we can see we have a reader and we have network contributor, which is awesome. Okay, so all of this work so that we can finally do what we actually set out to do, which was to create a managed DevOps pool. But I hope this has been helpful either way, because I mean, these are things you have to do anyways. So, but let's crack on. So we'll do not a data plane resource. We're gonna do an AzAPI resource. We'll call it a managed pool. And this one, I think I can do pools. Sometimes this is not the best to search in. Infrastructure, yep. So Microsoft DevOps infrastructure pools. The latest, the name, we can call that pool, that's completely fine. Again, the parent ID is actually still the resource group for this. This does need a location, so we'll put that. We could do var location, but you could also do just AzAPI, reference the resource group and do a dot location. Either one is fine, doesn't really matter. So then we do have the fun part. We're gonna start making it, because we have a lot of things we need to configure. But then again, we do get some help by the provider, so you do have the required properties. I love this part, because usually when I set something up, if I use Azure RM or some other provider, sometimes you don't know what resources or what properties, sorry, you should set. This one just is super helpful to get that. The other way I usually do it is I would usually just go to the Terraform registry and then just look in the provider documentation. But this one, like, you have it straight up in your IDE, which is just super helpful. But then it does want a few things. So we don't care for this one, we don't care about stateful for the agent profiles. So the kind is stateless. Fabric profile, we can see again, okay, what do we need to set here? So here you could specify images then. Maybe you could specify if you had a custom image, you could specify if you wanted to run a marketplace image, like the world is your oyster kind of here. The SKU, again, we had some required properties. This, if I remember correctly, is actually the SKU of the compute. So think of a virtual machine, it usually has a SKU, like a size. Det är lugnt, jag klipper bort det. Ja. To save on a little bit of time, I've actually done some home cooking. So I have prepared a fabric block. So for images, they have a property which is called well-known images. So here you could put, I put Ubuntu 24.04. You could put like Windows Server 2022 or yeah, whatever you would want. The kind is just VMSS. I want that technology. I want the scaling. The SKU, I've just picked whatever worked. If you want different SKUs, sometimes you would have to request to have that quota like increased. This one is a SKU that just worked out of the box. I didn't have to request an increase or anything. And then just network profile, I was talking about I wanted to VNet integrate this DevOps pool, so the subnet ID is the only property we have to fill in, and we can dynamically reference that from our AzAPI resource for the subnet. So organization profile is also fun, but you could do, this is also super awesome, but you could do the one for GitHub, we could do the one for Azure DevOps. We're going to do the one for Azure DevOps here. So the kind is Azure DevOps, and then you have organizations. This is also an object we have to build, so we are going to add that. And then you have required properties. We can do that. So the URL is something we have to fill in. Copilot is pretty awesome here. My organization is just my entire name, also the name of the channel. You could select which projects you want to use. So I think if you don't specify anything here, the DevOps pool is available to all the projects within your organization. We're going to do it for LimberTech CloudOps, just because it's fun. And we do have to supply parallelism, whatever, we have to supply that thing. And then we put a 1 there. Maximum concurrency, like how defines how many resources can be created at a given time. Yeah, we'll do 2, I guess it's fine. Also, I'm not entirely sure this one is super friendly out of the box, so we'll slap a schema validation enabled false on that. So that's pretty good. We do have to supply which dev center project this one belongs to. So that's why we have to create the dev center. So we slap that on there. And yeah, I think this is it. So we supply the parent ID, which is the resource group, the location, then we have the body here. So let's see if this one works. All right, that seems to have worked. So back in the portal, if we do refresh here, we do see we have our managed DevOps pool. And here we can follow, obviously the metrics right now, it's not being used, but in here we can see some fun things. So in the pool, for example, here's our configuration, the agent size, we could change that. We can see what organization we're working with, like how many agents do we allow. You could change to a better disk if you want faster jobs. And then you have agents. So right now then it says no data to display because we don't have any pipelines running. But if we were to go to our LimberTech CloudOps, so this is the Azure DevOps project, we could go to project settings, and then we could go to agent pools, and then we can see we have our pool here. Pretty good. But enough dilly-dallying, so let's go into pipelines. We'll do a new pipeline. And for here, we just want to do Azure repos, Git. We can choose whichever, doesn't really matter for this. Here we could do, if we had an existing pipeline, we could use that, but we're just gonna, for this one, take a starter pipeline. And the trigger then is, we're gonna change this from VM image to just the name of our pool basically. And that's that one. And the script is just a echo hello world, but let's do echo please subscribe. Do it. We can do save and run. We'll commit this to a new branch. Demo for video. We don't need to start a pull request, so we can do a save and run. And we have to give it permission, so you can just simply do that by permitting it. And we're off. Now, the first time this can take quite a while. I've had experiences where it's taken 5 or more minutes. Sometimes it's been faster than that. It's a little bit different, I guess. But the fun part here is we've launched the job. What we could do is we could go back to Azure. We could go into our virtual network and we could go to connected devices. And here we can actually see we do have a scale set instance. So it has actually just launched an instance of our virtual machine scale set. If this was a bigger job or we were trying to scale out, you would see more scale set instances here. You would see instance 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see here they do get an IP address, so they are living inside our virtual network, which means if we were to make outbound calls, we could control that traffic. So maybe a part 2 to this video would be setting that up, if that would be interesting. If we go back, we go into the managed pool itself, we can click on agents, and it still says no data to display. It's probably just still booting up. If we go back to the pipeline, we do a refresh. Yeah, it's just pending still. So I will make a cut and come back to you when it's complete. Okay, and we're off. So it just started the job. Check out. We can see under agents here, under managed pool, we can see we have a status allocated for one of our agents, and now it's finished. It's already pending re-image. It was super quick, but it was a very fast job basically. If we go to overview, can we see anything yet? Yeah, we can see some requests here, so it definitely ran. We should see this scale set instance here disappear eventually. While we're waiting for that, we can just see, did this work? Yeah. Please subscribe. I mean, if managed DevOps pools are telling you to do it, you should probably do it. But that's pretty awesome. We can close out of that. We can see here now for our agent, it says pending return. So we received our agent, we ran with it, now we're returning it, basically. And it's super nice because we don't have to manage any machines or VMSS or anything. It's all in a subscription hosted by Microsoft. We can just focus on the good stuff. Okay, I just went into connected devices again on the virtual network, and you can see the instance is gone. So we don't have it there anymore. If we refresh here, yeah, this one is still pending return, but it'll go away eventually. But yeah, that's it for the video basically. So we created a dev center, we attached a project to it so we could slot in our managed DevOps pool into that project. We created a virtual network, so we could VNet integrate our DevOps pool, which means we have some more control over the external traffic should we want to. And we ran a pipeline basically with our new pool. And it's pretty awesome. So I mean, for future videos, we could try and do things with the networking. We could do things with custom images, see what we can do there. I mean, I think this is super fun to mess around with. And I hope that you liked the video and maybe you will try it out yourself. I mean, there are so many videos about this and other stuff I make. I try to make my own personal touch to it and try and focus more on the Terraform and coding part while simultaneously also showing this stuff. Like, I hope you like the video, but if you would like to see them made some way differently, or if you have any tips or advice for me, I'm always all ears. Don't take offense if I don't listen, but I always read and I always think about it at least. But thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a great day. If you like the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.